Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Town of Lunenburg Council to order. It is a single agenda item. And I'd also like to take this time to make an acknowledgement, which is to become our common practice at the Town of Lunenburg, to make mention of the fact that we are residing on Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And then I would look for an approval of the agenda through motion of council, please. Thank you, Councillor Risser making that motion and Councillor Croft seconding. As mentioned, it is a single item agenda today, so all in favor? Any opposed? None left. All in favor. Motion is carried. And so we have to deal with the Brook Street Pump Station and related infrastructure proposed tender award. And we have Mr. Ian Tillard, our acting engineer, to speak to the, or to provide the staff report and explain it to us, if you would, please, Mr. Tillard. Mr. Tillard, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. So I think we need to do an unmute.
Hold on.
We can
so can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, gee, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to all the councillors for taking the extra time today. I know it's the middle of summer, but we do have a time-sensitive issue here. So I think it might be appropriate for me to walk back through the bit of history here, but very briefly. And as it's laid out in the report. So if the councillors remember way back, we had a report from a company called Design Point report related to the issue about flooding, and particularly around the Brook Street Pump Station issues related to the work done there. They had come up with a number of recommendations to improve the situation there. And originally we had, and I use the same terminology that they've used, but originally it was broken down to 5 pieces of work called CSKO1 through to CSKO5. We decided originally that we could do ourselves in-house the CSKO1 work, which is the installation of a simple overflow pipe with valve, and that the CSKO2 work was the next priority, which would be tendered. And during the discussions around that, the recommendation from Design Point was to include the CSKO5 work in the tender. So tender documents were created and was tendered. I can't remember when it closed at this point, but sometime early March, I think. But the prices, of course, must have been late March, early April, because certainly the COVID raised its influence at that point, and we found the prices to be a lot higher than our estimates. We had made some allowance for what we thought would be a sort of COVID response, but certainly nowhere near enough. And the other big issue was around how wet the areas, the environmental controls required to do that. That was underestimated. Also, I think there was an issue about the time of year to be tendering the work, which was pretty late for this type of work to be tendering at that time. However, that's the situation we had. We did receive 2 bids. Both the first bid was well in excess of the lowest bid was well in excess of our budget, and the next bid was double that again. Both were good contractors, though. So we discussed that with the designers. They went back and said, well, what we really need to do is to look at the functional aspects of this and delete the aspects that are really related to asset management out of the scope, but keep the functional aspects, which really the functional aspects are the issues that relate directly to flooding that we've experienced in the housing that feed into those lines that go down into that station. So we revised the scope of work around the Brook Street pump station, and we eliminated the CSK01 work from the tender. Sorry, I should back up. We had decided once COVID hit that we weren't too sure about ourselves being able to do that CSK01 work, so that was actually added in the tender as well. I forgot that aspect. So anyway, we've decided since then that we can do the CSK01 work, that simple overflow pipe. So we've taken that out of the scope, revised the scope around the pump station to include the functional aspects to ensure we still get the flood control that we're looking for. But there are some issues there related to asset management that should be worked on, will be worked on one day, but we decided to eliminate those from the scope for this revised tender. And we deleted the CSK05 work from the scope. So the end result of all that is with us doing the CSK01 work ourselves, renegotiating a price with the low bidder, which is Dexter Construction, for the revised scope of work. And in addition to that, we decided that we would buy the long lead items, which are 2 valves, 2 backflow prevention valves, that we've ordered those ourselves. So adding all those budget items together now puts us within underneath our budgeted amount, which is a total of $185,000. The budget consists of $125,000 from CWWF Funding, which is 75%, 75 cents on the dollar, I guess, and the other $60,000, which was D transfer tracks in terms of where the budgeted monies come from. So hopefully didn't get too confusing through all that. So what the end result is, we have a tender price with the contractor, the low bid contractor, performing the functional work that we need doing around the Brook Street pump station. We do a portion of that work ourselves, the CSK01 work, and that gives us basically 95 to 98%. I don't know if that's the right description, but gives us the functional aspects of that, those recommendations that we need done to provide flood control. The work that will be left out will be, as I said, some asset management type work for around the pump station. For instance, there's a catch basin that's actually in the Nova Fuels parking lot at the edge along the Brook Street side that needs shoring up, which we'll have to do some repair work ourselves, but we had anticipated pulling all that out and rebuilding it, that type of thing. So there's some items like that will end up getting deferred and will have to be added to a list later for later work, some time down the road. In addition, we're eliminating the CSK05 work, which is work that Design Point, after reconsideration, decided that's probably best that we could do that now. What that does is provides an extra security around flood control. It doesn't mean automatically there's flood control by not doing it. If there isn't flood control by not doing it, but it's just a little bit of extra for extreme conditions that would give us just a little more comfort in terms of flood control. So there is a slightly higher risk under, I think, only the very most extreme conditions for weather that will be at a higher risk with the CSK05 work not being done. And of course, that CSK05 work would then need to be deferred to some other year. And I think the other aspects of this is time is of the essence. So we do have limitations in timing in terms of the CWWF funding. We do have verbal commitments from the contractor. We're talking about approximately 3 weeks of work. So our target would be to have this all finished up by the end of August. If it slips a little past that, we're probably okay. But we've discussed that and figured we're pretty comfortable. The valves that we have ordered will be delivered, I think, on the 17th of August. So they will be here in plenty of time for both the completion of the work done by the contractor, plus one of those valves is associated with the CSK01 work that will be done by Public Works forces. And by the way, the Public Works work is I think it was about 3-day duration or 2-day duration for our portion of that work. So that's the kind of the history in a nutshell. And I don't have proposed motion in front of me, but if there's any questions around the history of this, I guess we could entertain those now.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Risser, you want to start off with
Yes, thank
the
you, Worship.
discussion?
Not a question on the history, Ian, but I'm just wondering, are we going to wind up paying more in the long run by not dealing with the asset management issues now?
Well, I have to say that probably not, only because everything we're doing right now is at a premium because of COVID. So if we defer that work to later, it's actually not sort of intertwined per se. It's a catch basin. It's a section of line that we'd like to replace. It's no indication that it's crumbling, but it's been there for a decent length of time. It's time for that renewal. So it's kind of independent in a manner of speaking. Doesn't mean that we have to go back and redo work that we're about to do to get at that work. So it's actually physically independent. So it's certainly something that's easily picked up later. And given that we seem to be paying a fairly hefty add-on for working in COVID conditions, I would have to say that we should be able to actually get it done cheaper, maybe down the road. Famous last words, perhaps. But.
That all sounded reasonable, so I'll move the motion.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Thank you very much. The draft motion is that Council approve the award of a contract to Dexter Construction for the Book Street drainage improvements to in the amount of $144,900 plus tax. And Councillor Mosier, did you have further questions or comments? No, just wanting to second. Okay, great. So we've got you down for that. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Worship. Hope you can hear me okay. I just want to ask, to Ian, I guess, if we had the money for the extra work that we're not going to be done this year, or is it all a timing issue?
Your Worship, I'm not sure I got all that question. I know somebody else got it and could repeat it.
You're asking Councillor Croft if it's a timing or a funding issue that some of the work is not being done? Both.
Both.
Yeah, so primarily is it a timing or is it a funding or both?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yeah, it was basically to work within budget, so it was a funding issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions? I had lots when I read the report, but I think you clarified a lot in your explanation. So I thank you for that. I do have one other question about engineering oversight, and I wondered how that's being done. And we've suffered with some unfortunate outcomes of work that had great intentions of properly servicing this area. And I'm just wondering what how that's being done. Is Design Point involved in some of that, or are you doing that directly on behalf of the town, or what do we have?
Yeah, Your Worship, similar to what we saw with the plant upgrade, with the aeration upgrade, where we had Sarah and CBCL oversight, we're doing the same thing with Design Point, and that's part of the budget that we had approved for Design Point's work.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions then of Mr. Tillard? And I see Ms. Dagley's there too, so if there's any from a financing perspective, she could do that. And if there aren't any, are we ready for the question?
Okay, I see some heads nodding. So all in favor of the motion, please signify. And the motion is carried, and so the tender can be awarded. And we thank you very much, Mr. Pillard, for all your work on this and for updating us on the progress and unfortunate but understandable situation of having to redetermine what work is priority here. So if that was our sole purpose for this special meeting of council, so I'd welcome a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Bachman. All in favor? So the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you all again very shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks.